want them, not them again.
Tell me what you want.
Barbados, stand up.
Tell me what you want.
We want new government.
Tell me what you want. What you want. Tell me what you want.
Barbados Labour Party.
Tell me what you want.
Barbados, stand up. Barbados, stand up. Bring the change.
Good night. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good night, darling. My immediate purpose here tonight is to support the candidacy of Dr. Jerome Walcott and Margot Durant Callender and my good friend Wilfred Abrams and Dr. Agard. And my friend, my learned friend who just addressed you, Mr. Desmond Sands. I feel proud that I am on this platform. I feel proud of my membership of the Barbados Labour Party. You two, you three, all of you, she says. But I am particularly proud to be on a platform and in a party that is led by Owen Seymour Arthur. And I am particularly proud and I'm particularly pleased that our esteemed leader has established a standard of conduct for this platform, for this campaign, and that there shall be no indecency and that there shall be no abuse from this platform, from this place. Since we look towards a future from a present that is extremely difficult. And therefore, let us go forward with excellence. Let us go forward recognizing that we must set a high standard of conduct from this platform. And since we are all equally involved in humanity, I wish to join Comrade Chairman Rudy Grant, and I beg your permission to express personal sympathy to the family of the late Sir Branford, a man whose entire adult life was committed to public service in this country. And we must acknowledge these things. We've stood across the border of the political parties, but we are decent people. And let us join Comrade Grant in that acknowledgement and express collective sympathy, and for myself, express personal sympathy for my two colleagues at the bar, Monique and Branford Jr. And as I told Branford Jr. this afternoon, a man has left the room, and let us fill that room. Let us in this Barbados Labour Party fill that room of humanity with the continuing excellence that this campaign has demonstrated so far. From this spot, thank you, Sir Branford, for your involvement in the political process. We shall move on. And he expects me to move on. He expects the political debate and the discourse to continue. And I seize this opportunity tonight to engage you in a matter of some public education. For the last 5 years in these communities across this country, you have heard of something called the Constituency Council. They went to Parliament in April 2009. And how you described it, ma'am, I cannot describe it in that way from this place, although I might agree with you. In 2009, this government, this illegitimate government, went to Parliament and passed something called the Constituency Councils Act. And for those of you in this country and this constituency who have been interested in political development, who have been interested in local government, may have been excited at the prospect that the time had come when people in these local communities, these village communities, these heights and terraces even, would finally have found some involvement in the political process called local government. The process by which you remove a lot of the responsibility from central government, from Bay Street, and take that responsibility unto yourselves so that your own lives and your local communities will be at your own responsibility. And that is what we thought when we heard that we in these constituencies were finally going to have something called constituency councils, local government. As my friend here says, we ought to have known better. It was coming from a Democratic Labour Party. And if we thought well of the legislation coming from the Democratic Labour Party, perhaps we ought to have known better. It was not to be. I want to address, in the short time that I have with you, just two features of that constituency council's legislation which should have some appeal to you, and which ultimately should tell you that from February the 22nd onwards, we shall have no more in this country things called constituency councils. They are about political mischief. It is about empowering the Democratic Labour Party in our villages. It is not about empowering the people in these constituencies. And I will demonstrate to you how that is so. The first part of the act that troubled me was the section which says, the minister shall appoint the members of the council. The minister. In any political democracy, a quintessential feature of that democracy is that those who are represented get to choose their representative. And indeed, that is what this present exercise is about. That is why we come on these platforms and ask you to elect us as representatives. And that is a quintessential feature. That is a fundamental ingredient in any political democracy, that those who are representatives must be chosen by those whom they represent. And therefore, that was the first breach. That was the first breach of this ideal called local government. It cannot be local government if the council is being appointed by the minister and one minister. Do you understand that one minister who sits in that cabinet has the authority to choose a council as far away as St. Lucie, as far away as St. Philip, even here in Christchurch South, if he is the representative in Deacons, as he was at the time? I'll take him a time. I come in, don't worry. When that legislation was passed, at the time the minister had the right to choose your chairman and the other members of your constituency, the minister. It had nothing to do with your choice. Is that right tonight, Christchurch South? Cannot be right. Everything about the legislation was wrong, and that was certainly wrong. It breaches a fundamental principle of local government. Let me say to you what local government ought to be about. Let me say to you what local government is about in other countries. It is a way of empowering you at the local and community level. For example, matters of garbage collection, the flow to your house of electricity and telephone and water, the utilities, matters of your children's schooling within the constituency, matters of road repair. Those are matters that these constituencies, these local communities can look after. housing repair for NHC units. Those are matters that ought in a future Barbados to be taken into the hands of local communities. There's nothing contentious about it. And therefore, a community council or a constituency council that is properly constituted ought to comprise persons on that council by virtue of their office elsewhere. In other words, the Postmaster General or his nominee, the Fire Chief or his nominee, the headmasters and headmistresses in the constituency, the church leaders in the constituency, persons who hold public office in a geographical area called the constituency ought to sit on these councils. A nominee from the Ministry of Public Works to deal with matters of road repair. These are the persons who ought to sit on a council that is properly constituted. But this government believes that it is in your interest to place, let me pause. I'm about to describe them in a way that Mr. Arthur may not approve of. But their political operatives have been placed into your communities not to represent your interests, but to represent the interests of the Democratic Labour Party when it sits every Thursday at Bay Street. These councils are not in your interests. These councils have been established to serve the interests of the central government at Bay Street called the Democratic Labour Party. And that party is only interested in perpetual power. And that is why these councils were set up to manipulate and to maneuver their way through these communities for the purpose of central government, for the purpose of George Street, for the purpose of the Democratic Labour Party. And that is why, come February the 22nd, you must make that pledge, not us. You must make that pledge, Christchurch South and East, and East Central and Christchurch West, that they shall be no more. You've had enough of them. Enough. The other feature which concerns me under this so-called act called the Constituency Councils Act, it's a very dangerous dimension of the act. A very dangerous dimension. I will pause and say this to you. Local government is normally established by sophisticated legislation, pages and pages of it, setting out the structure of the body, setting out those persons who ought to sit on the councils, setting out the responsibilities of the council, setting out a number of things. This is the flimsiest piece of legislation I have ever seen attempting to do a large job. A large job attempted to be done and to be established by a flimsy 4-page document called the Constituency Councils Act. But it gets more dangerous than that. A constituency council, good friends, is a department of government. It is a department of government. It is established by statute from Parliament, and it is a department of government. Here is what it says. Now, if you go to the welfare office, and I ought to have told you that the chief welfare officer or her nominee should sit on a council, since these are persons involved in the daily lives of the citizens in these local communities, that person should also sit on the council. As I said before, they should be on the council by virtue of the office they hold and not upon appointment by a politician interested in pursuing his own interests. But I come to that dangerous dimension. A government department, as all government departments, must be insulated from the private sector. Its finances must be insulated from the private sector. And that is why you have an Auditor General and an Accountant General, to ensure that government's finances are not subject to trespass or influenced by private persons. In other words, private persons do not have any right nor authority to contribute to government's finances. They don't have that right. Government's finances must exist in a very large safe. No private citizen must have access. No private citizen can buy his way into any government department. But here is how this legislation is unprecedented. The legislation says that constituency councils shall receive money and donations from private sources. This, Christchurch South, is without precedent. That is why I say it is dangerous. Here is a government department for the first time in modern history allowing itself to be accessed by private persons with money. And the act actually says this: donations. What manner of man crossing the face of this earth now has the power, and certainly the legal power, to encroach on government's finances, to encroach on government's official activity, and exercise over power and influence according to the extent of his wealth? That is legally, constitutionally, and morally improper. And that is why I say to you, come February 22nd, it all must end. It all must end. But I want to visit you. I want to visit you with this submission as well. Do you know where those monies were supposed to come from? I came to preach to the converted. Those monies, Clico money, was supposed to go into the constituency councils. These communities were to be bought electorally by Clico. And they tell me I should whisper when I say Clico. They tell you you should whisper when you say Clico. They tell you you should whisper when you talk about the persons who were, and I am not going to use any fancy language tonight, who were thieving the Clico money. And I want you to know where that money was destined. It was destined for the constituency councils, not to help people in any genuine way, but to judge people whether they were B or whether they were D, and to decide whether they would become entitled to assistance. That is not the kind of assistance these communities want. These communities want jobs. Tell Bobby Morris, we want money in we pocket. He told you yesterday it was the worst insult, that all you should be concerned about in 2013 is values. He wants love among us. Refer him to Sparrow. No money. Amen. Send the word to Bobby Morris tonight. I believe he has some association with the constituency council as well. They want to determine where you must eat and whether you must travel by bus or whether you must catch a taxi. But it is about values. Love, he says. I want you to repeat Sparrow's words to him and to his candidates when they come. No money. Amen. There is a lady, in the few seconds I have left, I have to tell you this. And perhaps I should whisper at this point, because there is a sacred name now in this country. And we must whisper when we say it. A gentleman died today. A gentleman. A few years, the leader of the Democratic Labour Party died. And his deeds, he will be judged by his deeds in other places. That is not for us, he's gone. If he were here, we would put certain charges to him. But at the time when that Clico money was being funneled out of the company, it went into an office. I'm forgetting my own pledge. I want to whisper now. I have to whisper. You see, these are sacred names. It went into an office. It went into an office managed by a woman who is a candidate in this election, who describes herself as royalty, who has determined that the people in St. John are mere subjects. They're not an electorate. And she walks around this country at night. Don't call my husband's name. We don't need to call it. He is dead. But 35,000 people alive and well in this country tonight. And they got children, just like she got children. But I want to whisper. They got me frightened, so I have to whisper. I have to whisper. The chairman has told me 2 more. No, I can't be rebellious. I can't encourage you in rebellion. But she says, don't attack her husband. He's dead. And he's dead physically. But you would think that she has done that with some grace and with some sincerity. And she follows that up by saying, but all the people in the Barbados Labour Party are dead morally. That is what she says. In an appeal to you to exercise sympathy for her and her family, she accuses us of having some deep moral deficit, as being dead morally. And I want you to ask her, as a candidate of that party, as a future leader of that party, where was she when that check arrived at the law firm? Mara Thompson, I beg your pardon. Mara Thompson. You have to whisper with these sacred names. Mara Thompson, where were you when the check, when those policyholders' money left Warren Street at the Clico office and went into that law firm? Were you the office manageress? Who was the office manageress? You have to whisper, remember. You have to whisper, don't call it. It is a sacred name. And she is a candidate in this country. And she wants to be a leader. And she is in St. John telling you that she is royalty and that the people up there are barefoot subjects. That is what she's saying to you tonight. But let us whisper. Whisper. I believe they're calling me home and I will go with a whisper. But night of the 21st, I will rejoice when I hear the returning officer. There shall be great rejoicing on that night, as he hereby declares the parliamentary representative for Christchurch South and East and West and East Central, Dr. Walcott. He shall say, Dr. Walcott, come forward. We've had 5 years of painful nights, and joy will come on the morning of February 22nd, 2013. God bless you. One love. Good night.
We do not want them. Not them again.
Tell me what you want.